Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are speaking today from the Jafet Library, a space named after Nami Jafet, one of the pioneers of the Lebanese Latin American community. Together with Charles Hayek, we'll explore the deep ties between AUB and Latin America, ties that began in the 19th century and continue to inspire us today.
The starting point of the relations between AUB and Latin America is an imperial visit that took place in 1871. Remember, back then, Lebanon didn't exist and Beirut was still under Ottoman rule. The archives tell of the story of the visit of what was then Dom Pedro, the Brazilian emperor, who had a very keen interest, especially a cultural interest, in the ancient history of the Near East. He landed in Beirut in 1871 and 1876 on two different trips with his wife. He arrived in a city that was experiencing growth and at the same time a city that since 1866 has been the theater of the beginnings of the Syrian Protestant College, the ancestor of present-day AUB. He arrived at this thriving, dynamic city that is becoming the hub of trade and culture in the Ottoman Levant and went from Beirut to visit iconic historical sites such as the valley of Nahr el-Kalb and the site of the Roman temples in Baalbek. And on his way, he even had time to assist and to take a course with the famous Cornelius van Dyck on campus. And also the archives preserve how much the emperor had respect for this venerable scholar, and it is said then when he entered the class that Van Dyck was giving, Van Dyck wanted to honor the emperor and introduce him to the students. The emperor replied that Van Dyck himself does not need an introduction because he is known all the way from Beirut to Brazil, and he even asked for an autograph of Cornelius Van Dyck. So there is another element and dimension to this visit. As you know, the Lebanese diaspora in Latin America is very significant and very influential. And the visit of Dom Pedro is credited with pushing many Lebanese and encouraging many Lebanese who, as of the 1870s and 1880s, especially the inhabitants of the Mutasarrifiyya of Mount Lebanon, were experiencing an economic crisis. It is said that Dom Pedro asked for this labor force to go to Brazil and to contribute to the building of his state. Given that this period coincides with the mass migration of people from the Mediterranean, the Levantines, the Greek, and the Italians to the Americas, and given that this period also coincides with developments of communication and transportation means, and Beirut becoming a very important port on the steamship network, people were encouraged to go and establish the nucleus of the Lebanese diaspora in Latin America, in Brazil, in Mexico, in Argentina, in Bolivia, and other countries. The starting point of the relation is old. It goes back to 1871 when Dom Pedro found his way to the AUB campus, and his visit is credited with pushing the Lebanese, especially those who were seeking better lives and job opportunities, to emigrate and to settle in Latin America. The push and pull factors were several to establish the Lebanese diaspora in Latin America. The main reason was the economic crisis, especially that Mount Lebanon relied heavily on sericulture, production of silk, and by the 1880s, this type of economy was under heavy stress. Second, there was this notion of new opportunities, new horizons, a notion that was also vehicled by Dom Pedro, who was in visit in 1871 and 1876. By 1900, we already find a well-established Syro-Lebanese community coming from the Ottoman provinces of the Vilayet of Beirut, of the Mutasarrifiyya of Mount Lebanon, of the Vilayet of Aleppo, and the Vilayet of Damascus. These immigrants not only established themselves as influential in economy, but also thought to preserve their culture in establishing cultural clubs and in even publishing books such as this one, Os Sírios e Libaneses no Brasil, the Syrians and the Lebanese of Brazil, to preserve some sort of their history, and they even contributed heavily in the making of the present-day Lebanese state. This very well integrated diaspora gave a lot back to their new countries. In terms of the medical field, the archives preserve the memory of David Haj, Habib Antoun, and Angelique Jamal, who became one of the leading women in the nursing dimension, Dr. Fadl Haidar, Zakaria Haddad, Said Abu Jamra. In also the industrial field, Najib Dabbar, George Wakil, Ramzi Shhadi, and the Jafet family. And in the journalist field, Najib Yaoub, Tawfiq Irbain, and Sami Rasi. And given that AUB's leadership was already aware of the importance of establishing link with the diaspora in Latin America, especially that many prominent members of the diaspora were alumni, AUB decided to send Professor Philip Hitti on an official mission to Latin America to establish proper links. Philip Hitti, who was born in 1886 and died in 1978, is a towering figure in scholarship. He's the first Lebanese professor at AUB and the founder of Middle East Studies at the United States of America. As a historian, his work is still influential to this day. AUB sent him twice on a mission to Latin America, first in 1921 and second in 1951, with three very important goals. First, to establish links with not only the Lebanese diaspora and the Syrian diaspora in Latin America, but also with the AUB alumni, to establish links with the authorities in these countries and try to establish cooperation project, and of course fundraising. The archives have preserved evidence of how his visit was perceived. He is mentioned, he and his mission in the archives, as an educational ambassador from Syria. His mission is very well documented in the journals and publications of the diaspora in Latin America, such as Al-Jalia, Jalia, an Arabic name that means the community. His contribution also was echoed but by what the Alumni Association in Latin America did to honor him as a visiting leading scholar of AUB. He also visited the Ladies' Societies and spoke about the role of women in the educational life of Lebanon and Syria, and he was invited to be a speaker at the 98th anniversary of the Brazilian Academy of Law, the most prestigious law academy in Latin America. He was also invited by Mr. Basila Jafet and 14 leading businessmen at the Esplanada Hotel, where the main fundraising event happened, and they were able to raise substantial funds that helped AUB in the context of the Band-Aid period, which was a period relatively of economic crisis. And these contributions are described in the archives as contribution for the common good. Later on, the alumni branches in Latin America, their activities plus the Friends of the AUB would be one of the manifestations of the relation between AUB and Latin America. Like in 1972, the Alumni Association celebrated its golden jubilee at the Hasbaya Club in Sao Paulo. Hasbaya being a very important town in what is now Southeast Lebanon, from where many alumni left and studied at AUB and later left to settle in Latin America. This alumni association was established in 1922, and Nami Jafet was one of the founding members. And the story of Nami Jafet will be later directly linked on campus on AUB. This association defined cultural, social, scientific activities at AUB, and also another association existed, the Friend of AUB, composed not necessarily of alumni, but people who believed in the mission of AUB and decided to support the mission. Nami Jafet is one of the exemplary models of how successful the Lebanese diaspora is in Latin America. He comes from a family that was linked to education. His father was, for a while, a teacher at the prestigious Old Orthodox School of the Three Doctors, Thalath Aqmar, and later on in 1893 he moved to Brazil, where his family invested heavily in textile industry and became tycoons in this field, and became also a very influential family in the Lebanese diaspora in Brazil. And given the link that he had with AUB, he decided to give back to AUB by offering what is now identified and called as the Nami Jafet Library. Nami Jafet attended what was then SPC, the Syrian Protestant College, the old name of AUB, and as a freshman he studied science and then math as an undergraduate. On his visit to Lebanon in 1921, he had already an idea to give back to his community. However, this will happen after his death. Nami Jafet always had in mind to give back to AUB. After his death, his descendants and three key figures would all contribute to the establishment of the library that would carry his name. The three figures are Dr. Philip Hitti himself, who proposed to this family to donate for a new library on campus. Charles Malik himself, a leading scholar and diplomat in Lebanon and at AUB, helped draft the plan of the building by defining functional need for a modern university, and the Jafet family, of course, secured the fund. And this is how, in 1952, the Jafet Library saw the light on campus. The building design, the building architecture reflected the modernist trend in Beirut in the 1950s that was not only a leading city regionally, but one of the hub of culture and production of knowledge on a global scale. And we see how the diaspora in Latin America, through the Jafet family, and the diaspora through the links with AUB, offered AUB a space where knowledge can be not only produced, but also preserved and studied. We're in April 1975. Lebanon still does not know that this year would be consequential and would witness the outbreak of the civil war that would last 15 years. However, in April 1975, a legend, a football legend, set foot on AUB's campus. Pelé himself, known as the Black Pearl, came to AUB, trained the AUB football team, and had the chance to communicate with alumni and with professors. And the archives still preserve his visit, either visually or in terms of articles that were published on the importance of his visit. The archives preserve the evidence of a friendly game. He played with the Nijmi team, a local football team, against a team composed of players from different French-speaking universities. According to L'Orient Le Jour, back then, 35,000 spectators came to watch and to witness the game, and later on Pelé stayed to give the football teams, the local football teams, some advice on how to win a game. Another aspect of the relation between AUB and Latin America are the different programs of cooperation between the faculties and sometimes states in Latin America. For example, AUB Farm Teaching Program from 1956 to 1970 hosted numerous students coming from Latin America notably from Bolivia, Costa Rica, and Mexico, who received training at the AREC, the AUB's farm in the Bekaa. Early international cooperation also with AUB was directly with the government, especially of Mexico, and explored possible collaboration in terms of capacity building for these governments. Also, the University Transformation Project, the most recent of the manifestation of these programs in 2021, AUB, together with international institutions, launched a project to share key strategies for successful university transformation with universities in Mexico, Haiti, and other countries in Latin America. The relation between Latin America and AUB is also manifested through the visit of notable figures from the Lebanese diaspora from Latin America who visited on many occasions the AUB campus, such as Carlos Slim, one of the richest men globally for a while, a Mexican businessman, Salma Hayek, the renowned actress, Rodolfo Usigli, the Mexican minister to Lebanon, and the Jafet family, who has been in direct relation and visits to AUB campus since 1921. There's another dimension to this relation, the blooming presence of plants and from Latin America, not only on campus, but also on the dimension of Lebanon. As we know, the historical links between Latin America and Lebanon have redefined the culinary tradition. Think of the widespread presence of tomatoes, potatoes, and maize in the local cuisine. And all of these are plants who originated in Latin America. On another dimension, if one would go for a stroll on the AUB campus, he would see a blooming presence of plants and trees, and especially flowering plants who originally come from Latin America, such as the Jacaranda, the Bougainvillea, and the Barbary fig. As we have seen, the relation between AUB and Latin America is multi-layered, and ever since the visit of Don Pedro and the continuous and significant contribution of the alumni in Latin America to AUB, donations have been a constant, cultural exchange has been a constant, and there is a new chapter that is being written between AUB and its alumni in Latin America.